Jacob's going to talk to us today about some research and things that he's been doing related to non-human interactions in email. Jacob, stage yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Matt, for inviting me. I'll be speaking about a very popular topic, which is non-human interactions and metrics that count. Again, I'm Jakub Olexa. I'm the founder of Mailkit and Omnivery, two ESP platforms, and I'm a proud email geek since 2001. So how did I get here? So it all started 8 years ago when we saw a weird campaign that had a good delivery rate, good bounce rate, very weird open rate and click rate. This was a small B2B sender, and they came to us asking, like, how is this possible? So we started digging, and instead of telling them, well, it happens, it led us down the rabbit hole of non-human interactions. So to get a bit of a context in, let's start with how tracking works in email. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just the basics. So the opens are tracked by an invisible pixel, usually 1 by 1 pixel, usually in transparent GIF, whatever is the right pronunciation at the moment. And this has never been accurate, simply because not all email clients loaded that pixel. So the numbers were inaccurate at first. Clicks, there are two types of tracking clicks. One is direct link tracking. And you can see that the example shows, a link pointing to Smart Post. This is very accurate because the link does the redirect, and when somebody clicks the link, they will first be recorded and then pointed to the target website. The indirect tracking is not that common these days, but there are still certain brands that will just have a link pointing to directly to their URL and append some UTM tags for Google Analytics, and then they'll just try to do the magic in Google Analytics or whatever analytics platform they use. Obviously, this doesn't give much context about the actual person behind the click. It could, but it's not allowed by most platforms. And then there's ISP data, which is aggregated. There are very few ISPs in the world providing this type of data, but there is a working group with Vermont that is currently trying to figure out a way how ISPs can provide this type of aggregated data to the senders. Again, it's aggregated. It's extremely accurate because it's measured by the mailbox providers. But again, it's an aggregate number that only tells you how many opens, how many clicks there were. It doesn't tell you who it was. So not really usable for any targeting or anything similar. Now, these metrics obviously change over time, and some of these developments being very positive for marketers, and because of Apple's MPP, a lot of marketers believe that, hey, COVID has a great impact on our emails. We were getting a boost in our open rates. Yeah, it wasn't Apple. It wasn't COVID, it was Apple. So this is the comparison of perceived open rates and the actual open rates when Apple MPP is discarded. Now, it's getting worse by the minute. at the end of 2024, keep in mind these are numbers from Europe where Apple is not as popular as in US. At the end of last year, beginning of this year, where I created or pulled these data, the impact was about 50% of all the opens came from Apple. Now we are on average at 60%, with some spikes to 65, even 70%. I'm gonna make a wild guess, but US will be much worse. Now, this is a nice comparison to see when did Apple's impact start and how abrupt it was. It was literally, a day-to-day major change. And they rolled out really fast and affected marketing campaigns across the world. And marketers didn't see that. But there are also clicks, and Apple had no impact on that because Apple has nothing to do with clicks when it comes to, or Apple MPP has nothing to do with clicks, or very little. There are some non-human interactions performed by iCloud and the infrastructure in front of iCloud, but it's compared to what we're seeing in the world of opens, it's completely different. I have a different chart that shows the impact of non-human interactions on clicks. You can see there's a weird spike in 22, or that it goes up in 22. This was a sender that had a specific reputation, let's say. And that led us to identify that there is a lot of correlation in terms of how much scans are performed by security vendors on emails based on the sender's reputation. Now, you may see that it goes up, and in the beginning of this year, we were around, roughly 3.5%. We are seeing an average of 7% at the moment, and there's a big variance in different verticals, and also between bulk marketing and transactional. That's by the nature of how these security vendors that do these non-human interactions actually cluster messages together, and the more efficient the clustering is, the less scans they perform. So transactional by nature is more spread out in time, and therefore they cannot be as efficient at clustering, and therefore they have to do more scans. So the impacts are severe. All the KPIs that marketers were used to are completely off. This is what you might think you have. This is the reality. It's quite different in so many ways that it makes you think about, what do I do with these KPIs? Now, in my opinion, you should have never trusted opens and clicks, or you should have never trusted opens in the first place. Clicks, okay, but it's because it's getting worse and worse. It's becoming a major challenge for marketers that got their management used to looking at opens and clicks rather than looking at revenues. And the management doesn't want to hear the long tail information, like we have this many conversions, because that's usually a low number. They don't want to hear about revenue per mail because again, it's difficult to measure an attribute. And for them, the open rate has been the leading number for let's say past 2 decades, and they were really used to it. That's no longer the case. So open rate as a KPI should really be discarded in B2C. Click rate is a major issue, especially in B2B and enterprise. And the impact is that all of this leads to false triggers, because now everybody is into automation. You spend weeks, months building your campaign automations. If this user did this, or click there, open that email, let's do a follow-up. Now, all of that gets triggered on opens and clicks that never happened by an actual human person who would be there and do the engagement. We spoke about engagement today, and the inbox providers are saying we want to have email or see emails that have high engagement, but how do you measure it when all these numbers are completely off? So is this the end of metrics? I think not. We need to forget about open and click rate. Apple MVP is just the beginning. There's going to be more coming. There is already more coming. It's just not that obvious spike compared to what Apple did. You also need to look at high quality data. At one of the conferences, there was an ESP who said, well, just deduct 10% from your numbers or 15% from your numbers. But how does that help you to fix your problem with all the automations that get triggered? It doesn't. Also, it might be 10% for company A, it might be 30% for company B, it might be 50% for company C. So you really need to work with the raw data, and today we are living in the world of CDPs, and you have all that data, so you should be able to evaluate the extrapolation of data. Just reducing the number by a certain percentage, that just doesn't work. And you need to set new KPIs, and this is marketers to their management. Prepare them that try to teach them. Open rates were always wrong. They're getting worse. They're an unreliable metric. We need something reliable. And that reliable is economics. I mentioned revenue per email or revenue per campaign. It's often hard to track because the conversion tracking is often not in place. It was somewhat left out. We see a lot of companies just leaving it out. We'll do it in the next sprint. We will add, all these scripts to collect this information, next month, and something cooler than email is always taking precedence, whether it's TikTok or, Facebook or something. There are so many channels that the most efficient channel is left behind. But the focus on economics actually helps, translate that message to the management. So who is playing with your data? Why? So as I mentioned, these non-human interactions are performed by security vendors, inbox providers to identify phishing emails. They scan the links to find out where does that link point to. It's not targeted at the good senders. It's targeted at the bad senders, of course, but they can never know whether that sender is really good enough or if their account has been hijacked. So there are good reasons to do those checks. And those checks can be easily seen by humans. If you have the data in front of you and you look back at the history, you start seeing the data. You start seeing, there was a lot of clicks coming at a certain time. There were clicks coming for the same recipient from different locations, different devices, etc. But we tend to see, the grass growing when we are too focused on these data. So we're making a lot of false positives simply because we are focused on finding something, finding the needle in the haystack. So it's a bit challenging. In real time, detecting this is extremely difficult because you don't have the context. You cannot tell, oh, there were so many clicks before, there will be so many clicks after this click. You don't have the context. So frequency detection becomes very resource intensive and has very low efficiency for the good non-human interactions. So for the security scans, because the good ones are very good at hiding. They don't want to be detected by the spammers, by the phishers, by malicious actors in general. Also, there's a large variety of user agent strings and IP addresses that are being used, and that makes it really difficult without the context. Looking at history, very simple. It's fairly simple to, suppress the data after the fact, but doing it at the time of the event it's hard. Now, this is a minor promotion for what we do. We have built bot detection API for this. And it's not only for the non-human interactions performed by security scanners, but we are actually pretty good at identifying malicious actors that will do this for various purposes. And it can be applied to both opens and clicks, both emails and other channels, because people usually think email as an only channel that might be associated with non-human interactions, but SMS is just as much affected, and that is much more complicated to detect because it's the actual device performing the check. So we came up with a product to allow third parties that we vet to take advantage of our know-how. That's it for me.
Right on. Any questions from the audience? Don't be afraid. Don't make me ask all the questions.
So opens and clicks are dead. Let's start there. So deliverability brain, opens are still super relevant if you're looking to kind of help measure if you're going to the inbox or not, right? So do you think that that's also useless now? And if so, what should I do instead?
So I think they're not dead from deliverability perspective, because if you look at opens as a signal for deliverability, and you look at trends and how the opens are on each recipient domain, then you can make comparisons, and it gives you an information about your deliverability. But if you're a marketer and this is your KPI, then that's not valid at all.
Thank you. Follow-up question. How do we educate the senders on the difference? Because I have been seeing tons of stuff. Your presentation as well said like they're dead, stop measuring them. How do we educate them on the fact that they can still use it in certain applications, but as a general rule, don't use it as your KPI or North Star?
I think that's going to be a challenge because most marketers are not deliverability people. They even how many platforms show the breakdown of open rate by destination domain? You know,
Not enough.
so do we, but not enough, right? And you know, the more you go down market, the less detail you get, right? So teaching them, you know, when I do these presentations to marketers, I tell them, yes, do track opens so you have the trends and focus on how's it going over time, but don't tell your managers, oh, we were, you know, this campaign was successful, because you don't know whether it was successful or not.
Just want to piggyback on that. I think it's important how we communicate this in the sense where if it's a KPI benchmark, you know, maybe that's what we need to educate on. Lauren's point is that it's useful in certain contexts. I think so one thing to consider also is like who's not opening, right? So the antonym of those metrics. But what so many senders, they take it very literally. If they hear like open rate, click rate is dead, the question always comes up, well, what am I supposed to use? They always forget to look downstream to see like, well, what about regular things that you could measure? So do they have site sessions? Do they have activity, right? So mapping those secondary, tertiary dimensions to this type of engagement is really helpful because like, are they doing something, right? I totally get your point on it shouldn't be a benchmark, but we should be careful because I get that feedback all the time. Like, what am I supposed to do then, right? Maybe it's the education, but they take it way too literally. So we have to provide them with what the context is, when it should be used, and what else we can add to that to enrich it. That's my comment.
I would add to that, yes and no. The problem is that how many marketers that you know are actually deliverability people and understand that context?
One.
Very few, right? And then here's the problem. Even consultants would make mistakes and make assumptions. So you just said, oh, look at the metrics on the website. But unless you discard and create filters in those measurements in the website will also include those visits from those security bots.
There's some things they will do and some things they won't.
Exactly. So some of these smart bots will take the opportunity to load up the page and index it at the same time, since they're already there. Maybe they're a search engine. So it's really hard to just say, compared with your Google Analytics, because then we had a consultant saying, oh, the numbers add up, it's almost there. And then we added one filter to Google Analytics, and suddenly it wasn't there.
I think that's oversimplifying it, but if you look at like what makes up real human behavior, so there's a variety of things that you could use to enrich it and say, well, is a bot making a purchase? Is a bot doing X, Y, or Z? I think.
Yeah, and that's why I always tell marketers, and especially in B2C, look at the revenue, look at the sales from the campaign. Like, fact that somebody opened an email will not make your salary. The fact that they bought something, that's part of your salary.
While we're talking about KPIs, let's stop making the biggest list wins as a KPI, because that's not a good KPI either.
I think one of the things is that what the ISPs see is not necessarily what the ESPs see or what the brand sees. Because Google Analytics aside, the receiving ISP doesn't necessarily know who made a purchase of the website or not. Like, so just because a campaign is successful revenue wise doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be successful in the inbox. Like if the time to read is low, or if if there's not enough people engaging with the message, maybe they just, because a lot of brands will think, oh, I just want people to see me in the inbox, and they'll think, oh yeah, maybe because the sales meeting just go directly to my site, which is good for revenue. But if they're not engaging with the messages, you can have a successful campaign that still doesn't really help your overall deliverability.
Yeah,
There's sort of different things, and the metrics that the ISPs see in terms of opens and clicks is absolutely most basic, but then there's how much scroll, time on page, which links were clicked, like, if you went back and opened it again later on in the week, whatever. There's so many things that they see that go into whether or not you land in the inbox consistently. That it's really always goes back to just customer journey, making sure the customers are, want to engage with you, because the more that they do, the better you're going to perform. And while saying, yes, check the revenue to see what was a successful campaign, that doesn't necessarily translate onto the email side of things.
well, it has to be revenue from the campaign, so it's well attributed to the email itself, not just, revenue on that day, or, it has to be properly attributed.
But again, the ISP first, in terms of your inbox, like they're not gonna necessarily.
Of course not, but it's kind of the most accurate thing, how you can derive that there was enough interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about the bot API product. So one, what is the concern about it being used if it worked in real time or nearer to real time?
It's not real time.
Well, it says it's not real time, exactly, but what is the concern that is trying to be avoided, like if it were able to function in real time?
So because we do receive certain data from those good scanners, we had to implement certain protections to make sure that this cannot be abused. So first thing is that we vet the customers who can use the API. Second is that the API itself, the data output, cannot be used in real time or semi-real time process that would allow the redirect to change based on the identification, because then the malicious actor would identify, oh, this is a bot. Well, I'm not gonna send the user to the fake Bank of America page. I'll send them to Google homepage.
I got you, okay, yeah, they were talking about that in the cyber crime session the other day. And the other question I had is, in a use case if like I'm running an ESP, would I be able to use this product to potentially like enhance my own intelligence, like say, oh, okay, I know these IPs are typically where bot links come from, and like essentially discount, filter those out. Is that something that the license would allow for?
Yeah, so a lot of ESPs started building this in-house. When we started 8 years ago, we had 2 or 3 parameters that we used. Now we're using 17. Tons of data goes into this, and a lot of curation of the data. But yes, Beehive is currently implementing this because they're having, CPM model that is heavily abused. We're talking to a few other large ESPs about taking advantage of it.
Jacob, one detailed question adding to what Lauren was asking, using open rate as a measurement for deliverability. I don't know, I didn't research. Does Apple download the images even though they are sending the campaign into spam? No. So okay, that means it is clear indicator. When I've got zero open rate, I've got a deliverability issue in that. Or with
Yeah, if you go to that extreme, of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
if your open rates are 2%, 3%, then you can say you have a problem.
Okay,
But
cool. I
If
just want
if you're somewhere, I'm having 20% open rate,
and when it suddenly drops, then it could be a sign, right?
if it drops,
Okay,
then
I've
yes.
never done that research.
But if you're hovering around 20%, or your campaigns are doing better, you're at 40%, that alone doesn't tell you much,
Agree, yeah.
right? And Apple MVP, that is easily detectable. Apple is very public about how to identify MPP. That's the easy part, right?
Okay, but that means it's valid to look at it in terms of deliverability issues. So it's a great indicator that is still valid to use.
Yeah, I'm always saying look at open rates not as a total number, but per domain. And you can over time you can easily paint a picture of the ratios between Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft, and other services. And it's fairly stable, those ratios are.
And it's that more looking at to the deviation, how large is the deviation?
Exactly. When you suddenly see a drop on one of those, I have a problem here. The problem is that marketers are rarely doing this.
Yeah.
I wanted to make one comment on the question that LB had. Like, if you use data to enrich your own set, but you're not owning the data, be very careful with that. We have seen a lot of users using our data sets, basically storing them. But the data set is not a one-way street. It's like something that you maintain. So when Jacob says, oh, they moved to a different cloud provider, that subset of IPs is no longer valid, and you stored it, you're not removing that. So be very careful to duplicate data sets that you do not own.
Yeah, and especially like with our results, the bots are not static. They're not just sitting on the same IPs all the time and just chilling. The simple ones, those are, you can detect them. But the smart ones are traveling the world, traveling the devices. They may use that IP for an hour.
Jacob, is it safe to say that pretty much anything in one of the cloud networks is probably not a human generally? So it's sitting in Acer, no humans there.
In theory, yes. In practice, there are lots of VPN gateways of corporations that terminate in Amazon data centers.
Just a request for comment, but it seems on a form collection level or from a platform, like so much more could be done. Like you could create a field that's hidden by CSS so that it's crawled and filled, but the human eye can't see it. Well, then that that's not a human. So do you have any comment on why has this not really been rolled out by platforms or form creators or anything? Because it's like, it seems like there are some obvious solutions that could stop it at the gate, but we're not seeing that. And so we're trying to sift through our data and identify this. That's part of the solution, but we need to stop it at the source if we can. And
I don't think you can stop all of it at the source.
No, but there's got to be some mechanisms to say if a crawler fills out a form that's hidden by CSS, not visible to the human eye, and you accept that anyways, how could it be filled if it wasn't a human?
Yeah, of
So
course.
there's some solutions like that. But do we hear much discussion about that? I don't see platforms rolling that out.
As far as I know, most large platforms do have some protections from this because form attacks are a big thing. And we're, at least we, at our company, in my company, we do have that, but we don't announce it to the world. Why would we? Because then it would be easier for the bad actors to abuse it. But ultimately, most of the lists are, built by orders, built by, on the basis of someone buying a product. That's how they get into the list, not that they go and subscribe to a newsletter. So that is a human in most cases. Of course, it could be an abusive human who uses a stolen credit card. There are solutions like eHawk to fight that. That's more on a marketer side, so they implement this. And usually not even marketer side, this is someone in web development department, and even marketers have trouble, convincing the web developers, oh, we need to have eHawk or something. But once that address is okay, the order goes through, the package is delivered, that email address makes it to the list, starts receiving email, gets into the whole mix.